As an NFL quarterback, there are millions of eyes on you and countless expectations. Under that pressure, many fall flat, but the best of the best are able to become better from it and live for that pressure and use it as motivation. But there is a gray area, there is a middle ground, and that is where we find Sam Darnold. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. And today, with the news of a new 3-year, $100 million contract with the Seattle Seahawks, we are talking about how Sam Darnold saved his career. To begin, we must first start in the beginning of the NFL career of Sam Darnold, where he is selected in the first round by the New York Jets. And this is a franchise that has struggled with quarterback play for quite a long time by this point. But this is a draft class that features the likes of a Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen, who would eventually go on to become, in the case of Jackson and Allen, MVP quarterbacks. In the case of Baker Mayfield, quarterbacks who would go on to throw for over 40 passing touchdowns in the season. In New York, they want a piece of that quarterback pie. This is an organization, a team that has many flaws, but views Sam Darnold as the foundation. And going into this is a major market. So with that, there's the added pressure of even more spotlight. But the Jets feel as though in giving Darnold a couple years to develop, they can build a proper team around him. But ultimately, he goes on to not perform to the level that they would hope for. And eventually, Sam Darnold finds his way out of New York. His final year there, he throws 9 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. And the Jets' offense consistently struggle to put points up on the board. And at this time, the general consensus surrounding Sam Darnold is that he very much has the potential to be a draft bust. Now, because of the caliber of prospect that he was, being a first-round pick, there's likely going to be a team that gives him a second chance. But at the time, there's very low expectations for Sam Darnold. Coming into it, the hopes were high from the Jets organization, but that didn't pan out. And now, any kinds of flashes of potential are going to be a major positive for Darnold. And he goes to the Carolina Panthers. Now, going into Carolina, given the way that things went with the Jets, there can be a little bit of a crisis of confidence with Sam Darnold. And perhaps like no other position on the field, that is really going to affect your performance. Because at the QB position, not only are you expected to be the leader of your team, but also to have your mind sharp and be ready to read defenses, make audibles, do whatever you can to push the ball downfield, and limit distractions, limit the noise outside. And throughout his tenure in New York, that had really been a problem for Sam Darnold. There was, of course, the famed seeing ghosts. And given the rough third year that he had, going into Carolina, Sam Darnold has already begun digging a hole for himself that he's going to have to climb out of. And part of that is a failure from the Jets front office to properly provide protection and weapons for Sam Darnold. But at the same time, there were not a lot of flashes of the player that he showed that he could be back at USC. And with the Panthers, his first year there, he throws 9 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. And given everything that has gone down to this point, 4 years into his career, 4 years into Mayfield's career, after 2 up seasons and 2 down seasons, people were more than ready to write him off. But Sam Darnold, it's nearly been all down seasons to this point. And speaking of Baker Mayfield, for year 5, now here he comes into the quarterback locker room. And now there's a quarterback competition. 2 fellow 2018 draftees ready to try to prove themselves and give themselves a shot at redemption, proving that they still have what it takes on the outskirts of the league to still be NFL caliber quarterbacks. And they would share some time as the quarterback for the Panthers. Ultimately, Baker Mayfield would wind up being released by Charlotte. And at least for part of a season, Sam Darnold had a chance to put together a stretch that could give teams hope that he could still be a quarterback in the NFL and a capable one. In that year, he would throw 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. And while that's a quite small sample size, especially going for just over 1,000 passing yards that year, in of course a very limited amount of games, he would have by far to this point his best touchdown to interception ratio at 7-3. And his passer rating at 92.6 would be the highest mark that he had ever hit before. And while it was the furthest thing from a pretty season in Carolina, there was finally the slightest resemblance of potential with Sam Darnold. And maybe, even if he could not be even a low end starting quarterback, maybe this is someone that could be a high caliber backup. Because the first few years in New York, he couldn't even manage to be a capable role playing quarterback, where he's not necessarily asked to do too much, but hey, maybe he can at least be safe with the ball. That wasn't necessarily the case. But in this last year in Carolina, once again, he wasn't asked a whole lot, but the moments where he did come up short were less drastic, and as a result of that, maybe he has the potential to, say your starting quarterback gets hurt, has the potential to fill into a good coaching system nicely and be a capable passer, if nothing more. In the following year, that's what we see in San Francisco. Darnold doesn't get much playing time at all, but when he does get a chance, playing quarterback under the genius of Kyle Shanahan and with plenty of weapons to utilize on this offense, he throws for almost 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick. And going into that offseason, he had solidified himself as, at bare minimum, a passable backup quarterback. And maybe at the highest level, the perception was that he could be a bridge quarterback, maybe a 1-year rental to allow a young guy to sit and develop, or maybe you have to find that franchise quarterback and you allow Darnold to play in the meantime. And he goes to Minnesota. And for the Vikings, that is exactly the plan that they have for him. Because in that draft, they decide to select J.J. McCarthy. And this is a quarterback room that had just lost Kirk Cousins. And while Kirk has his ups and downs, ultimately, he was a positive and a stable presence at quarterback for years for Minnesota. And with this new quarterback room, they're putting a lot of stock into J.J. McCarthy to be the future. And the idea was going into the year that Sam Darnold wouldn't even spend the whole year starting. And ultimately, he would pass the throne over to J.J. McCarthy. But as fate would have it, J.J. McCarthy would end up getting injured before the season. And now Sam Darnold, who had once been expected to hand over the starting spot before the season was even over, well, now he has a chance to prove himself to be something even greater than a bridge quarterback. To not only be a 1-year rental, but instead someone that you can trust to, in the right situation, have under center for your team for an extended period of time. And he would go on to have by far the best season of his career, completing over 66% of his passes, throwing for over 4,300 yards, with 35 touchdowns to 12 picks, and by far the best passer rating of his career, hitting that 100 mark for the first time ever. And it was a season where at one point there were conversations for Sam Darnold to be an MVP candidate. And going into the year, especially with the loss of J.J. McCarthy, there was kind of this narrative, this expectation among many vocal members of the public that the Vikings were going to have a very down year. But Sam Darnold, now he's got weapons that he never had before. To this point in his NFL career, he's got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. When he gets healthy, he's got TJ Hawkinson. And if Sam Darnold is able to just effectively deliver them the ball, then he is going to have a successful season, and that is just what happens. And then we get back to that line of expectations in which Sam Darnold is still adjusting. On one hand, coming into the league as a high draft pick, he absolutely struggled with, to this point, the biggest spotlight of his NFL career. And then he would reach rock bottom going to Carolina and having a disastrous first season there. Then going into year 5, there are not many expectations for Sam Darnold. Baker Mayfield ultimately ends up taking the week 1 starting spot. And by this point, things do not look good for his career. But when he gets a chance to shine, he finally starts to begin putting it together. And then in San Francisco, he's not asked to do very much, but he executes when he has to. Then you get to Minnesota, and with the perfect situation around him on the field, as well as an offensive mastermind at head coach, the quarterback whisperer in Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold not only saves his career, but he redefines it. Because he saved it when he showed that he could be a capable backup, because that gave him a chance to stay in the league for a long period of time, even if it was bouncing around from team to team as a second or third string. He showed that at least he had grown as a player and as someone that you could trust in moments. But for the Vikings, he reignited the spark of his NFL career and became the quarterback that after the first couple seasons that he had in the NFL, it looked like he was never going to reach the heights that he would go on to. And for a long period of time, he really made it a question for the Vikings on if Sam Darnold was the quarterback of the future or if they were still going to stick with their plan of J.J. McCarthy. And for him to even make that a question was something that was not expected by the majority of NFL fans. And when it comes to that line of expectations, Sam Darnold has grown in many areas. He kept himself in the league by performing well enough in moments of low expectations, like for the 49ers or year 2 in Carolina. And once he carved out a spot for himself as a bridge quarterback, he became something even greater. And as the season went on, expectations grew higher and higher for Sam Darnold for him to maintain this level of play. And ultimately, it didn't translate into the playoffs. But for the first time in his career, we saw Sam Darnold not fold under the pressure of bright lights and high expectations. And it may have taken many, many years in the NFL, but Sam Darnold has finally figured it out and not just saved his NFL career, but revitalized it, reignited it, and rejuvenated it. Now he's going to find himself a Seattle Seahawk. And that roster right now is one looking to enter a rebuild. You've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who has all the tools to be great number 1 wide receiver. But outside of that, Tyler Lockett's gone. DK Metcalf is gone. This is a team that no doubt has some work to do and is laying the groundwork for a capable team a few years down the line. But for the new QB1 over in Seattle, throughout his career, throughout the adversity that he has faced, Sam Darnold has grown as a player and as a leader. And for a team with a stormy forecast coming up, Sam Darnold will provide some stability for them at the quarterback position. But when this team is finally ready, given everything we saw from last season with Sam Darnold and the growth that he has shown, when this team is ready, no matter the adversity or the question marks surrounding him, Sam Darnold is not going down without swinging. And that is all for today's episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you very, very much for listening. If this was your first impression, I know the microphone quality probably isn't great. The best audio system I have right now is plugging in this $60 microphone into my laptop for a voice recorder. but I really want this to work out ultimately. And this was not my favorite episode, but this is something that I am quite passionate about doing and something that I am going to do everything in my power to make it work. And there's going to be an improvement in audio quality over time. There's going to be an improvement in my performances over time. And right now, it's about putting out the best stuff I possibly can in the moment and creating something even greater, building the foundation for something even greater in the future. Much like Sam Darnold has the potential to do in this new year and new era of Seattle.